Hey, what's going on, YouTube? So today I wanted to get an early start on my Week 5 predictions for college football. AP poll just came out actually a couple of minutes ago, so yeah, pretty much all updated on everything I can be updated on for the week coming. So my record last week was 13-7, and that brings me to an overall record of 57-23 now. So it has been a pretty wild season in college football. Last weekend just kind of furthered that. Not really any top end upsets that affected, I'd say, the top five, but definitely a wild shakeup in the lower half of the top 25, and just some games that really not a whole lot of people saw coming. So go ahead and start with my first game, Purdue and Michigan State. So Michigan State's been rolling through. That win against Oregon obviously doesn't look as good anymore. The fact that it was only a 3-point win and Oregon just got destroyed last weekend against Utah. I'm assuming most people saw that. If they weren't watching it live, then they definitely noticed what happened by now. They lost 62-20 at home. So yeah, I still think Michigan State's a good team. I still think they're a top 5 team. Not taken away from that win. I don't know what happened against Oregon. Utah just had their number. I think the inexperience on Oregon's defense. I think Oregon's defense has really come back to bite them, and then the inexperience from Vernon Adams at FBS play just kind of all meshed together into one just terrible game for Oregon. I do still think that Jeff Locke is I wouldn't say the answer for him, but I think he could get the ship headed in the right direction. I think that it would at least establish a solid base for next year for Oregon. So. And I do believe this was the first week that Oregon's been knocked out of the top 25 in quite a while. It's weird to see them outside of the top 25. Just haven't seen that in quite a while. I don't know how long it's been exactly. Maybe I'd say it's been 6, 7, maybe even 8 years. But like I said, pretty wild. So move on to my next game, which is Minnesota and Northwestern. So starting early with the upset of the week. I don't know if this is just going off premonition, just going off my gut, but I think that Minnesota's going to win this game. My upset of the week last week got shut down pretty early. Anu Solomon got hurt, and Scooby Wright just didn't look like himself. Arizona just got overall beat by UCLA. Josh Rosen looked really good. UCLA is just stable at running backs, took the game over. So Jamavo, one of the two. And then Paul Perkins they pretty much destroyed Arizona in every facet possible. UCLA looks like a solid team, but anyway, I do think that Minnesota's gonna be the upset of the week this week. They haven't looked good so far. They had a close win last week. I think it might have been 2 weeks. No, it had to have been last week against Ohio. Not a very good Ohio team. It was like 27-24, and then the week before they had to, I believe they had to beat Kent State also by 3. Again, not a good team. Really, the only game they've looked impressive in is the TCU game, and I think that was just early season jitters for TCU, and also TCU showing that I think it's mainly injuries, but TCU's having some inconsistency problems this year. But yeah, so I do think that Minnesota's going to win this. I think that Northwestern, 2013, they were also a first 4 games team, and I think that's going to continue this year. I mean, like I said, my upset of the weeks haven't gone so good or gone too good so far this year. I think the only one I got right is Texas Tech versus Arkansas. So, yeah, like I said, that's just going off premonition. So move on to my next one, West Virginia and Oklahoma. So I believe this game would be drastically different if the game was not in Norman. If the game was in Morgantown, then I think West Virginia could easily win. I think they have one of the biggest home field advantages in college football. Definitely one of the more underrated ones. But West Virginia's looked nothing but solid so far this year. Definitely an underrated team, an underrated defense. Might be one of the top 5 teams. I wouldn't say one of the top. Might be one of the top 3 teams in the Big 12. This week will definitely show if it's West Virginia or OU as the 3rd best team in the Big 12 for the time being at least. West Virginia looks solid on all facets. Like I said, defense has been really good. Offense looked very good, putting up, I think it was 21 points in the first quarter against Maryland. Maryland isn't proving to be as good as a lot of people thought they would, but still a 45-6 victory against a somewhat decent Big Ten team. Still pretty impressive. OU had a bye week. Baker Mayfield's obviously looked solid so far. Like I said, I think OU's going to win this game since it is in Norman. I do think that these teams are pretty evenly matched. OU's got a pretty high-powered offense. West Virginia's got a very good defense. It's a good matchup. Definitely be a fun game to watch. Move on to Texas and TCU. So for the second straight week, Texas has a huge upset. Well, not a huge upset. A huge disappointment on special teams. So 2 weeks ago, it was Cal that escaped a 45-44 win against Texas because the Texas kicker just pretty much botched the extra point. I think someone got a hand on it, but either way. And then this past week against Oklahoma State, kicked it out of bounds, maybe a 10-yard punt. Just ball went right through the punter's hands. I'm assuming most people have seen that. So I don't think that I don't think Texas can even come close this week. The game is in Fort Worth. If the game was in Austin, like I said, it might be different. But TCU is still a very solid team at home, even with all their defensive losses. I think Texas could put up maybe anywhere from 30 to 45 points this week. I'd even give it 35 to 45. TCU's defense has been looking a little bit weak, but the offense has not missed a step, and that's what's been keeping them alive is Trevon Boykin, Josh Doctson, and Aaron Green in that offense. And I think they're going to stay alive for another week in the college football playoff and still having a top 5 rank. So move on to my next game, Iowa and Wisconsin. So Iowa been looking really solid so far this year with C.J. Beathard at starting quarterback. Believe they're 4-0 now. Wisconsin 3-1, coming up by a 28-0 win last week. Haven't really faced anyone solid since the Bama game, but I do think that Wisconsin will be able to take care of business this week. I do think it'll be a very good game. Iowa's vastly improved from last year. Definitely one of those teams, the Big Ten, that just looks like I wouldn't say came out of nowhere because they were still an okay team last year, but kind of along with Michigan, a lot better than people expected them to be. So I do think it'll be a close game. It'll definitely be an entertaining game to watch. Might be a little bit of an offensive struggle, but I do think it will be close, and Wisconsin will come out on top in the end. So move on to Alabama and Georgia. So even with how big the Notre Dame and Clemson game is this week, game day is going there, I still think this will be the best game of the week, most entertaining game, also the game with most at stake, even though it's not the two highest ranked teams. So Georgia, I believe, is 7 or 8, something like that right now. And then Alabama is 13. So both teams, even though they did win this past week, slid down in the rankings just because of what happened around them. I do think that Georgia's going to win this game. The game's in Athens. Alabama, I think they got out they got all their troubles out from the Ole Miss game against Louisiana Monroe last week. I don't think that Alabama's going to be able to slow down Georgia's running game. Nick Chubb has got something like 12 straight 100-yard games now. I don't think that Alabama's going to be able to corral Georgia's running game. I don't know if there's anyone in the nation that can. Nick Chubb, Sonny Michael looks as good as advertised as well. Keith Marshall, I think, has been looking pretty good too. Georgia's got a running back stable at 3 deep. 3 running backs could pretty much start for any other team in the country. I don't think that Alabama's going to be able to pull this one out, but I do think it'll be a close game. It'll be one of the most entertaining games to watch this week. I think that Grayson Lambert will be pretty good, but the quarterback battle between Jake Coker and Grayson Lambert, I think they'll play a much bigger role than a lot of people think they will. I think both quarterbacks could easily have 2-3 touchdowns and over 300 yards passing. The focus is probably going to be on the running game going in, just obviously because the Derrick Henry and Kenyon Drake battle against Sonny Michael and Nick Chubb. But like I said, I think Georgia will come out in the end probably by a field goal, maybe 2. So move on to Ohio State and Indiana. So Ohio State kind of put a lot of their doubts to bed last week against, I believe it was Western Michigan. But like I said, it is Western Michigan. I think Indiana might be the second best team that Ohio State's played so far. They are 4-0, but I think Ohio State will take care of business. I think Cardale Jones is starting to find his niche finally, settling into the offense. Like I said, I still think that just me personally, still think that JT Barrett's the better quarterback for the regular season, but he has not been looking very good. I still think it's because they haven't really given either quarterback a chance to get settled in with the offense yet. If you guys saw last year, I believe it was while JT Barrett was starting, Ohio State did lose to Virginia Tech, but after JT Barrett got settled in, it was just Ohio State taking care of business game in, game out. But Cardale Jones, I think, is a lot of the same way. As soon as he is getting settled into the offense, Ohio State's been moving a lot smoother. So I think this will be a big win against Indiana this week for Ohio State to get their first Big Ten win of the year. So move on to Florida State and Wake Forest. So I don't think this one will really be anything close at all. Florida State, I think they're pretty much stayed where they were in the rankings. Not much to say. I think they'll probably win by 21, 28 points. So move on to Baylor and Texas Tech. So if you guys saw the Texas Tech TCU game, very entertaining game, very offensively heavy game. This game is at AT&T Stadium, as it has been the last few years. Believe that Baylor is kind of the front runner for the Big 12 now. Not even kind of. I think they are the straight up front runner for the Big 12 now. They looked. I know they haven't played anyone good yet, but they looked very solid last week against Rice. Seth Russell threw a touchdown on half of his completions. The offense looks as efficient as ever. If the defense can get it together in Big 12 play, and they do have very, very, very tough first task against Patrick Mahomes this week. But I think it'll be the type of game where it's like, I don't know, 66-50, something like that. Just a classic Big 12 shootout. A very, very high scoring game. Both defenses have not looked good at all this year. Texas is just never good, seems like, and Baylor just hasn't played anyone good yet, and they've been letting up. They didn't really let up too many points to Rice last week, but it is Rice. They did let up over 30 points to, I don't think they let up over 30 points to SMU, but they did let up over 30 points to Lamar. Let up over 20 points to SMU. Now, SMU did put up like 37 against TCU, but either way, I think Baylor is going to have a defensive struggle, but they will come out on. I think they'll come out on top in the end and kind of put these Texas Tech upset rumors to bed. I do think Patrick Mahomes is a solid quarterback, and Texas Tech is a lot better than last year, but I don't think they really have a chance to upset Baylor. So I move on to Ole Miss in Florida. So Ole Miss had a little bit of a closer call than they probably would have liked to last week against Vanderbilt. I believe they won 26-17, a lot closer game than I think anticipated. I do think a lot of it was the hangover against Alabama. But they do take on Florida this week. A Florida team that barely escaped with a win last week against Tennessee. They do crack the top 25 this week. Florida, I do believe, is a much better team than they've been in the last 2 years. Regardless if they go with Will Greer or Treon Harris, I think they're a much more solid team. The defense looks good. The offense is moving the ball a lot smoother now. Ole Miss is a whole different animal for them this week, though. They have been playing some decent competition. Like I said, last week against Tennessee, they played East Carolina, so decent teams, but they have not played a team anywhere close to Ole Miss yet. I think it'll be maybe a 10-14 point game. Might look close at times, but Ole Miss will control it the entire way through. So move on to Mississippi State and Texas A&M. So I think this is going to be one of the more underrated matchups of the week. Mississippi State, I think they're still relying entirely too much on Dak Prescott to be clutch in the end, but I think that's what the definition of their team is. Mississippi State is a good team. I do think they're one of the better teams in the SEC West, but they played Auburn a lot closer than I think than I think they would have liked to last week. Auburn, I still think is going to improve a little bit before the end of the year. Their offense is going to be anemic probably the entire year, but I think the defense can be able to get it together, and I think a lot of people saw that last week, that Auburn's defense is good, that they are talented. Will Muschamp will lead them in the right direction at some point. But I think in this game, Texas A&M, they had a little bit of a gap last week against Arkansas. I think they need to get the quarterback situation figured out, stop throwing in Kyler Murray so much. If you want to let Kyle Allen get in a rhythm, let him take pretty much all the snaps in one game. If you got maybe a third and short situation, sure, throw Kyler Murray in there. But I think it's kind of throwing off Kyle Allen's confidence a little bit. I do think that Arkansas was a much more spirited team last week. They're starting to get used to the players they have in hand. Big injury bug has been going around for Arkansas. They lost their tight end, Hunter Henry, but their backup tight end, Drew Morgan, stepped up in a big way. But I still think that Texas A&M should have played better, and I think they will this week against Mississippi State and come away with the win. So I move on to Notre Dame and Clemson. So that's where game day is going this week. The game that features the two highest-ranked teams. I do think that Notre Dame's going to win this game. The game is at Clemson, which I do think will help them out a little bit, but I think Notre Dame's really starting to come together as a team. They're definitely pushing all the injuries aside. Deshaun Kaiser's been looking better and better every week. Will Fuller's a Heisman contender for sure. I don't think that Clemson's going to be able to keep up with Notre Dame's offense, and I think that Notre Dame's defense is going to be able to shut down Deshaun Watson to enough of a degree where Notre Dame will be able to pull away at the end. Kind of will be unfortunate for Clemson if they lose this game. Even if they do win the ACC, I think they will be outside of the college football playoff. I think if Clemson is going to make the college football playoff, they will have to be undefeated. Now, if Clemson does win this game, it automatically shoots them up into a college football playoff favorite, into contention, shoots them up into, I'd say, the clear ACC champion favorite. But for now, I do think Notre Dame's going to win and show that they should be in the college football playoff. So move on to Michigan and Maryland. So Michigan just had their way with BYU last weekend. Michigan looking like a Michigan team of old. Now the Utah loss is definitely looking like a very, very good loss for them now, if there is such thing. So Utah, like I said, beat Oregon, just beat the daylights out of them, 62-20. Now Michigan in their opening week went to Utah, only lost by 7, and that is their only loss so far. They've been beating teams pretty handily ever since, and they do finally crack the top 25. I believe they're number 23 now. So I do think they're going to beat Maryland, no problem. Maryland's been having trouble the last couple of weeks. Got destroyed by Bowling Green, then got destroyed by West Virginia this past weekend, and I think that Michigan's as solid a team as any team they played so far. West Virginia might be a little bit better, but still, I think it would be a good win for Michigan this week. So move on to Arizona and Stanford. So at the beginning of the year, I thought this game would have a lot bigger implications for the Pac-12. Still could, because right now I do believe Stanford is the front runner in the Pac-12 North. Oregon just doesn't look like they're going to be. They could be in contention this year. They could still get it together. Oregon and Stanford will still have a big game that will decide the Pac-12 North. But for the time being, it's Stanford. If they can take care of Arizona this week, then it'll just be another step forward for them in the right direction. Stanford's been looking solid ever since their opening week loss to Northwestern, and they looked very solid last week in a win against Oregon State. Look like they're definitely moving in the right direction. Arizona looks like they're headed in the opposite direction. They've been having injury troubles for it seems like all year to their key players. Scooby Wright came back. Did not look like himself. Obviously, he's playing with I wouldn't say a torn meniscus, but not a fully rehab meniscus. He came back, 3 weeks after surgery. So I don't think as long as he's playing all season, I don't think he's going to be looking fully healthy. They'll lose Anu Solomon for I don't know how long. He might play this week, but I don't know if he'll be fully healthy either. And I think Stanford will be able to run away with this one. So move on to Arizona State and UCLA. Again, another game that a lot of people thought would have bigger implications by this time of the season. Than it actually does. Arizona State got run over by USC last week. They don't look at all like the top 15 team that a lot of people anticipated them to be. I do think they'll still be a bowl team, maybe an 8-win team, but UCLA definitely looks like the front runner in the Pac-12 as a whole right now. So I do think UCLA is going to take care of this game, no problem. So I move on to Kansas State and Oklahoma State. So Kansas State just had a bye week. I believe their last win was against, I don't know if it might have been UTSA. No, can't remember. Anyway, Kansas State coming in 3-0. Oklahoma State coming in 4-0 again against a pretty lucky win last week against Texas, honestly. They couldn't move the ball at all in the fourth quarter. If you guys watched the game, if you watched all the way through, then you kind of saw why Oklahoma State's been having so much offensive trouble in the last 2 or 3 years. It's just can't get an offensive rhythm established. One guy that I don't think has been, I don't ever like to say this, but I think one guy that hasn't been criticized enough for Oklahoma State is their offensive coordinator, Mike Yurcich. Ever since he took over as offensive coordinator, Oklahoma State's offense has looked ridiculously bad, out of rhythm, just not characteristic of themselves. And whenever I hear Mike Yurcich's name, it's always just praise, just that the offense has been looking good. Granted, I don't think that the reason why the game was so close, obviously it wasn't his fault. Mason Rudolph had a pretty bad game. If you guys saw his little fumble, just dropped out of his hand, looked a lot like a Jeremy Johnson play from the week before. The Jameis Winston play from college football playoff last year. Literally the ball just dropped out of his hand, and I do believe after that happened, his confidence was completely shaken. It was completely gone. Ball was coming out of his hand weird for the rest of the game, and in the fourth quarter, Texas knew what Oklahoma State was going to do every time. When you run a draw up the middle, I believe it was 12 or 13 plays in a row, then you're not going to go anywhere. And Texas's offense couldn't do much more, but Oklahoma State ended up winning in the end. I do think that they're going to end up winning this following week against Kansas State. Oklahoma State's defense has looked solid in every game so far. They look like they could be the best or second best defensive unit in the Big 12. West Virginia is the only one that looks, if not just good, maybe even a little bit better. Both Oklahoma State and West Virginia look like they do have the two best Big 12 defenses by far. So I do think that combined with the home field advantage is going to be enough for Oklahoma State to come out in the end and get a 2-0 record inside the Big 12. So move on to South Carolina and Mizzou. So two disappointing teams coming, or basically so far this year. South Carolina had to replace Connor Mitch last week, and they actually look pretty solid. The most solid South Carolina's been looking so far this year in a pretty big win against UCF. Now UCF has not been looking good at all this year. I believe they're 0-4 now. But I think that was a game that South Carolina needed against a historically reputable program just to get some confidence for themselves. Farrah Cooper looked good as expected. Now, while South Carolina might be headed on the way up, I think that Mizzou's completely headed in a different direction. They lost to Kentucky last week. Kentucky team that sure might be a tad bit underrated, but definitely not a contender in the SEC for sure. I think Mizzou has kind of proven to everyone that they're not a contender in the SEC East this year. Matty Mock doesn't look like the answer for them. The defense has been playing pretty good as normal. Now, Mizzou does lose these games. It happens. They're a weird team. They've proven in the past that when they get destroyed, they can come back and win games they really shouldn't. Now, like I said, you can't count Mizzou out until they're pretty much eliminated from contention in the SEC East. They've proven that last 2 years, but I do think South Carolina's going to come out on top. They look more talented. They look more put together than Mizzou does right now. But yeah, do you think that South Carolina's going to be able to move to, this might be their first SEC game. Yeah, 1-0 in the SEC. So they already played Georgia. So 1-1. Move on to Washington State and California. So I don't think this game's going to be close at all. Looks like a normal down year for, I can't even say it a down year. Just normal tough year for Washington State. California looks a lot better. Like I keep saying, for one reason, that's Jared Goff. I think they'll keep on rolling this week. They finally cracked the top 25, number 24. I don't think this game will be any sort of close. Maybe like a 55-24, 45-24 sort of win for Cal. So move on to Miami and Cincinnati. So I think this is the only Power 5 week game. It's either Thursday or Friday. Now, I think this is a big game for Miami because if Miami does want to springboard into ACC contention back into the relevant picture on a national basis, basically just be able to vault themselves back to the top 25 because they do look solid this year. I think it starts with this week in Cincinnati. If they want to be taken seriously in the ACC, I think Brad Kaya needs to have a solid game. Joseph Yerby, I think he should be able to take the lead as the starting running back for Miami this year. Now, they do have a decent stable of running backs, but he is the talented freshman. He is the future for them at running back. I think that the combination of him and Brad Kaya can form a pretty good future for Miami. And they do look solid so far this year. 2 weeks ago, almost blew almost like a 20-point lead at home against Nebraska. Managed to hang on, win in the end. Like I said, if Miami does want to vault themselves into the national picture again, kind of put themselves back in the top 25, starts by getting a big win this week against Cincinnati, a team that was supposed to contend in the American Athletic Conference, but really has not yet. So we move on to my last game, which is Arkansas and Tennessee. Now, this game was supposed to be a lot more high stakes by this point in the year. Like I said, kind of like the Arizona State UCLA and then Arizona Stanford games. Two teams that have very much disappointed so far this year. Arkansas just looks like a shell of themselves after all their injuries. I believe they were like ranked 18 or something at the beginning of the year. They did put up a good fight against Texas A&M last week. Alex Collins proving that he is everything as advertised. But I think with all the injuries, it's kind of just decimated Arkansas. They had a really bad loss to Toledo 3 weeks ago, then lost to Texas Tech last week, or 2 weeks ago, and then this past weekend lost to Texas A&M. So I do think that Arkansas is going to be able to, I don't know if they're going to be able to get it together too much. They might be a 4 or 5 win team this year with the strength of their schedule. Now, Tennessee, it's hard to come up with excuses for Tennessee anymore. It's just been sad. Last week looked like they had it against Florida again. Gave up about a 50-yard touchdown reception at the end of the game and drove down. Looked like they'd be able to kick maybe a 50-yarder to win the game. Got a delay of game. Kicked, missed, but Florida iced the kicker, and then Tennessee kicked it again and missed it by a hair. So Tennessee did lose 28-27. I'm not a huge Tennessee fan myself. It's just one of those things where I want to see them get back on a relevant national title picture again. Not even national title, just on a relevant national picture again. After the loss to OU and the loss to Florida, it's proving that it's just the same old thing for Tennessee. They are improved, but until they can get that monkey off their back to win big games, I don't know. Like I said, hard to come up with excuses for Tennessee. I do think they'll win this week. I don't think that Arkansas is as good as Florida or OU this year. I don't think the game means as much for Tennessee, so I don't think it's going to be that much for them to beat a team like Arkansas. It's not as big a rivalry as the Florida game, and then OU, just a good team that was able to come back against Tennessee. I think that Tennessee's talented enough to be 4-0 this year. If they were able to lock down, they'd be a 4-0 team in the national title picture, not in the national, but in the college football playoff picture. But same old story for Tennessee. Can't close out games. Ends up losing a bunch of 1, 2, 3-point games, something like that. And yeah, so I do think they're going to win this week. But yeah, so that's pretty much it for my college football predictions this week. A lot of big matchups starting a lot of conference play this year for a lot of teams. Definitely, I think the best week of matchups so far. It could be another wild week in college football. It's got the making of that. But if you guys noticed today, kind of my rant day for a lot of teams. Big weekend in college football. It's been a crazy year so far. I know it's college football. It's crazy every year, but I think this year more than others. It's been a fun year to watch college football so far. And it's been going by fast, but it's been entertaining. So, yeah, that's pretty much it. I'll come back either later today or tomorrow with my college football top 25 for week 5. So, yeah, that's pretty much it. See ya.